everybody. Welcome to Psychom Chat with Ntigi. My name is Nontsigelelo Ntigi Saki, and you know what we do? We just come together and we talk to a scientist, who's a science communicator, and we get to know a little bit more about them, how they ended up in science, why they do science, and we get to know about their research and also the importance of their research. It's really great to know why they do what they do and why it's important for the well-being of humanity. So today, our guest for today is Nathasia Mudiwa, and we're having her, and she's going to have a chat with us and talk to us about her science journey and also her role as the co-founder of Visibility STEM Africa. So I'm not going to waste much time. I'm going to bring her right in. Engage with us. Use that comment section and comment and engage and keep the chats alive. Also, use the question box and ask questions. Good evening.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. A bit tired. It's been a long week, but I'm good.
I can imagine. It's like only like today is the 1st of April, so we're going to the fourth month of the year. But
Exactly.
it's already been such a busy year with so many things happening.
Absolutely. It's been incredibly busy. It is a bit scary that it's already the 1st of April. I'm like, where is the year going? And today is officially the first day of my final year of my PhD as well. So it's also like, okay, crunch time. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So a year from today, you will be Dr. Nathasia.
I will be Dr. Nathasia, yep.
Amazing. That's so exciting. How long a journey has it been?
Oh, it's been a long journey. I mean, now it's been 3 years of the PhD in Luxembourg. But I mean, for me, the journey, I would say, really starts from like the undergrad. It's all felt like one continuous, like, up and down journey.
I can imagine.
To be honest.
Yeah, but let's get to know you a little bit before we obviously start dissecting your journey and getting to know how you ended up in science. But for somebody who's never met you, who doesn't know who Nathasia is, like, can you just give us some insight on who she is?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Nathasia Mudiwa Muwanigwa, and I'm from Zimbabwe originally. But I spent most of my childhood in Botswana, actually. So from when I was about 3, 4 till like 13, I was in Botswana, so all my childhood there, then moved back to Zimbabwe for high school. And then after high school, I went to Cyprus for my undergrad. I did a bachelor's in Cyprus in human biology. And at that time, I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor, also because I think a lot of Africans can probably relate that when you like things like biology, chemistry, medicine typically seems like the, no-brainer. That's kind of the journey that people take often. So I went to Cyprus, and then there I did this degree in human biology. But there I had my first kind of exposure into research and research as a career option. I got to do my own research project in my final year, and I just fell in love with being in the lab. I just really enjoyed the process. So maybe that's actually where my journey truly started. It was during that internship where I was like, oh, wow, I can like do science for a living, I can extract proteins and look at DNA. And I just found that absolutely fascinating, really going into the molecular of particularly of human biology. That it just excited me, and it's something I was like, okay, I really would like to do this. And I was fortunate to have a really nice supervisor who was super encouraging as well, and was like, yeah, you can do this. If you want to be a scientist, go for it. Because up until then, it never seemed like a viable career option, not even something that had been presented to me. So I never even thought about it. So so from that, I did that project, and that kind of motivated me to look into a research master. So a master that was more based on research in like biomedical research. So I applied for a program in the Netherlands, and I was super fortunate to get a full scholarship to this program, Molecular Mechanisms of Disease, at Radboud University in the Netherlands. That was back in 2016, I believe. Yeah, 2016.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. And it's actually like, feels like ages. It was kind of busy ago now. I'm like, wow, time is flying. So yeah, then went for the master's. And during that master's, went through the whole, do I want to continue? Should I do a PhD? But the great thing about that program was I got to do 2 internships in 2 different labs, got a lot of like lab experience, also got into neuroscience specifically during those internships. I always had an interest in the brain, But there I got to really dive deeper into it, and I was like, I can do this for years. Like I was really enjoying although during the masters there was a lot of imposter syndrome as well. There was a lot of like questioning, can I, also particularly because I was the only Black African often in the spaces that I was, so then there's a bit of insecurity that seeps in. But yeah, no, then I did a lot of thinking. I really enjoyed my projects, and then I was like, hey, I'm gonna go for this PhD thing and see where it goes. So then applied for a PhD in Luxembourg, where I currently am. So now I've been in Luxembourg for 3 years, and I'm doing a PhD in Parkinson's disease research. And essentially I'm looking into what are the cellular and molecular changes that occur in Parkinson's disease during the progression of disease. So that's like in a very small nutshell what I'm doing. So that's a bit about me and my kind of journey across 5 countries.
You kind of like answered like 3 questions in one day.
Yeah, maybe you should go back and like detail. Yeah, I put a lot in there.
That's okay. So with your research in Parkinson's, why were you so interested to deal with Parkinson's? I mean, you could have looked at any other disease, but why Parkinson's?
So to be honest, like it wasn't necessarily that Parkinson's was the like that I was particularly looking for Parkinson's. To be honest, during my master's, I wanted to work in neuroscience in general because I wanted to understand the brain better. So it was more personally motivated because I had a family member who was dealing with mental health issues. And as a scientist, I always try to look at it in the perspective of what's actually happening in the brain, and not a lot is understood about mental issues, psychiatric issues. And so for me, the best way for me to try and understand it was to be able to study what, like, actually the brain in some shape or form. And so when I was in my master's, when I was looking for my internships, I just really looked into neuroscience labs. And my first internship was more in neurodevelopmental disorders that affect children. But for me, that was already a really interesting entry point, right? Already understanding how the brain works and what goes wrong when it doesn't work, right? So for me, it was that entry point. And then in my second internship, during my master's, I got to work on ALS. So that's amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Many people know it as the disease that Stephen Hawking had. And I think a couple of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, there was this this ice bucket challenge when people were raising money for ALS. Maybe some people remember that it went viral like a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
so I was working on that.
I didn't do it, but I remember it.
Exactly. So yeah, so I was so I got to do an internship on that, and that particular disease is a neurodegenerative disorder. So essentially, some brain cells die in that disorder, and that's what leads to the hallmarks that are associated with the disease. So then I just got like, oh, this neurodegeneration field is very interesting to me. So once I was looking for PhD, I was now just like looking for, okay, something in neuroscience, also something in stem cell technology, because that's also a big part of my research. I'm using a lot of stem cell technology to model and study these diseases. So when I was looking for PhDs, I was really like, I want to find a project that excites me, that was super important to me. Because if you're going to invest 4 years of your life into something, you should be excited, because I know a PhD is tough, and I was like, I need something that will always motivate me and always excite me, so that even when things are hard, like I know I can still find the motivation. And I literally was just on the internet, like, PhD in neuroscience. and honestly, like, the position I found, it was so perfect. It happened to be in Parkinson's disease, but was also combining stem cell technology, which I thought was really cool. And since ALS and Parkinson's are both neurodegenerative disorders, there's some similarities, although they, of course, are quite distinct. It was also just a good fit to continue in that realm, and was still allowing me to continue to get a deeper understanding into the brain and what goes on in brain dysfunction. That's really how I came on it. And now that I've been doing Parkinson's research for the past 3 years now, I'm like, Parkinson's is so interesting. It's very complicated, but I think you can, to be honest, I'm of the opinion that if you just dive into any topic, you can find pretty much anything interesting if you're a curious person. because the more you dig, the more you realize you don't know. You know, sometimes like on the surface, something seems quite boring, but then the more you dig and the more layers you peel off, it gets more and more interesting. So for me, like, I didn't know that much about Parkinson's prior. And then the more I've been going in, the more I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but it's really interesting.
I really enjoy doing this. That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. And obviously you mentioned a little bit about stem cells and those kind of things that you're dealing with. So how do you handle the ethics of it, especially when you talk to other people? Because people have varying opinions about the use of stem cells, you know. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the interesting thing about the stem cell technology that I'm working with is actually trying to circumvent the ethical issues of stem cells. So so prior, I would say maybe a decade or so ago, when working with stem cells, we were relying almost entirely on embryonic stem cells, so from embryos, which of course would come from if somebody has a miscarriage, for example, or they opt to have an abortion, or you know, something like that, which of course then gets into a bit you know, into dicey territory. But then in 2004, I believe it is, there was a new technology that was established by a scientist called Shinya Yamanaka. He's a Japanese guy who he won a Nobel Prize for this technology. So essentially what he was able to do was to take cells, like skin cells from adults, and he rationalized that if cells can start from, you know, stem cells and then become into mature differentiated cells, could it be possible that we could reverse that and take differentiated cells and turn them back into stem cells that essentially have the capacity to form any other cell in the body? So he did some amazing work, of course, with his lab, and they essentially established a way to reprogram cells from somebody, an adult, a consenting adult. You just take a biopsy of skin and reprogram them into stem cells. And so, of course, then this means you no longer need to get the cells from embryos, and you can get consent from someone. It's not very invasive because it's just like a small tissue biopsy from your skin. And then from there, you can then generate stem cells from these. And what's even more cool about this technology is then you can get these samples from patients who have genetic disorders like Parkinson's. So now we're able to get material directly from patients who can consent and say, I want to donate myself to research. We reprogram them into stem cells, and then these stem cells have the capacity to form any other cell in the body. And then you can now introduce certain growth factors and signaling molecules to direct these cells to become what you want. And then we turn these cells into neurons and into these little mini brains. And this is essentially what I use to look at Parkinson's disease. So it's pretty cool. It feels a bit sci-fi a little bit, like you're taking cells and you're making brain tissue. That's what, yeah, but that's essentially what we, at least in our group, that what we're doing. And I think then that addresses a bit of the ethical concerns. There are new concerns that come about with these technologies, because now different labs are starting to generate mini brains and mini kidneys and mini eyes from these stem cells, which is really cool. But like in terms of the brain, people are like, what if they eventually become conscious? We're very far from that, but you know, it raises other questions. It raises other questions, but I think it is cool, especially for the modeling of genetic disorders, because now the samples that you have the same genetic mutation as the donor. So then you have a much better and more representative model to look at these diseases, because before we relied a lot on like mouse models, rats, which a lot of the times, especially for brain diseases, a lot of animals don't actually they don't reflect a lot of the diseases we have as human beings. So being able to have these stem cell models has really changed the game and opened up a lot of opportunities. So that's and that's why I was really keen to work with it as well. It's very novel technology, but also it's kind of, I didn't really want to work with animals personally. I just had a preference not to. But at the same time, I also wasn't super keen on working with the embryonic stem cells. So for me, this was kind of like a perfect middle ground. In a sense.
Middle ground, Okay, no, it's really, the research is very, very interesting, and I really find the stem cell technology in particular very, very fascinating, because if you think about it, in the next couple of years, I mean, it's a real game changer in terms of organ donation, or people are on the list waiting for organs and things like that.
Absolutely.
or because, for example, if you don't have the finances to save your baby's cord, umbilical cord, right, the placenta and stuff during birth, you can store to use in the future for any disease they might have.
Yeah, potentially have.
Then
Yeah.
to use the stem cells instead, because obviously the whole placenta storing and stuff like that, it's not a cheap thing to do, and
No.
it's a case, it's not even a guarantee you'd ever need it.
Absolutely.
You know, so
Absolutely.
it's
No,
storing 8 years of your life.
no, exactly. No, it opens a lot of opportunities, exactly as you said, like for organ donations or tissue replacement. And there's already some work already starting to do clinical trials, even of replacing for people with Alzheimer's or Parkinson, trying to do cell replacement with these stem cell derived brain cells. And it's still, still work in progress, but I think it's promising, especially considering you can generate brain cells from your own tissue, so there's no issue of rejection because it's the same
Yeah.
genetic material as you. So I think it's super cool, and I think it potentially will revolutionize how medicine continues to develop in the coming decades. It's really exciting to be able to be in such like a cutting edge field at the moment, because it's still quite new. This is quite new technology.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, this is so cool that I get to work on this and do a PhD in this field. Like I'm really like happy that I'm getting to work with the kinds of material I work with, and also working in the context of a disease that is very debilitating and is increasing in prevalence yearly. And I think it's estimated that by 2050 it will surpass Alzheimer's as the most common neurodegenerative disorder. So it's quite a pressing issue, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Well, like your research is very interesting, but let's move on a little bit to talk about your science communication. And let's look at you looking at representation and advocacy, and you being the co-founder for Visibility STEM Africa. So tell us a little bit about Visibility STEM Africa. Why did you and Natasha as well?
Yeah. The two
decide they're going to be co-founders of Visibility STEM.
Yeah, sure. So, to be honest, I think the motivation came during my first year of my PhD because of, I guess I sort of touched on it earlier, that I was oftentimes the only, or most of the time, even up until now, I'm the only African/Black person in the spaces I'm in. I mean, like very recently I was at a conference and I was looking around and I was like, wow, there really are no Black people here or Africans. Like it was maybe 5 of us in a room of like 1,000 people, So in my first year, I just started thinking about how I didn't really see a lot of representation of African scientists specifically in mainstream media, and I became very active on Twitter. And even on Twitter, I wasn't really seeing a lot of, I was starting to find and connect with people here and there, but I still just felt like there was this lack. And for me, that was a problem, especially my master's, because I think had I had like role models that I could like connect with, I would have felt more confident in myself, because I second guessed myself so much purely based on the fact that I'm a Black African woman, not because of my capabilities or anything. It was just purely like insecurity due to, the other people around me. So with this context in mind, I was in my first year, got really active on Twitter. I was seeing all these other different initiatives like Black in Neuro. There was like different, organizations that were working to improve representation, but there was nothing Africa specific. So I started talking to a couple of people with the idea in mind. And then the other Natasha, I'll just call her Nata. So I'm Tasha, she's Nata. Otherwise it gets very confusing. So Nata just reached out to me very randomly on Twitter. She DM'd me because apparently her partner found my profile and he sent it to her and he's like, she sounds just like you. And she was like, what? And then she looked at my profile and she saw we had a lot in common. So she just DM'd me and she's like, yo, like, this is so random, but my name's also Natasha. I also grew up in Botswana. I've also lived in 5 countries. I'm also doing a PhD. And I'm like, are you like my long lost, like, I don't know, doppelganger? Who are you? This is weird. Like, so yeah, we just connected, and just through the conversation I mentioned, hey, I've had this idea to start this initiative, because she grew up in Botswana and always wanted to do something to have an impact back home. Back in Botswana where she grew up and where she feels like it really shaped who she was. And I'm like, hey, I actually had this idea to start this initiative to kind of amplify the voices and the stories of African scientists, because I haven't seen much of that. And honestly, that's just how it started, through like a DM conversation. And then we're like, cool, let's do it. And literally we just like set up a Skype. We started Skyping like regularly to think about what exactly this would be. And long story short, it turned into Visibility STEM Africa, which is essentially a platform and initiative that aims to just empower and uplift African scientists who I feel up until recently haven't been given much of a platform to share that they're also contributing significantly to science and also have aspirations to be scientists, and also to provide visible role models for the next generation of young Africans, you know, to see Black people, to see Zimbabweans, South Africans, Nigerians, whatever, everything in between, and say, hey, I can also be a neuroscientist. There's nothing that's stopping me from doing this. Like, there are people who look like me in these spaces. And so we do different work. We had a conference in 2020 that was really, really well received. I think we had almost 300 participants. It was during COVID, of course, so it was virtual. 300 participants from all over the world, really great speakers, really big networking event, which was really, and it was just me, Nata, and our team. We have an amazing team of people who have also helped us throughout the years, and all like African women who are based all over the show. So we're a very international team. And we've profiled over 100 African scientists now, and people who are from masters all the way to people who are professors, even people outside of academia, to show also the breadth and the variety in STEM-related fields. We also want to show let people talk about their successes and their struggles. You know, I think it's great that people can see the realities, and I think it's also nice that people share like that they've gone through some hard stuff, but they still were able to achieve that. And, you know, I think being able to share those stories can be powerful for young people, and even for people. I mean, when I read the stories, honestly, it's motivating for me. I'll be there when I'm editing the stuff. I'm there like, yes, you do your stuff, sis. Yes, you know, I feel
I'm right there with you.
I'm right there with you. So for me, it's also motivating for me to see like my peers also just navigating their own special and unique and just brilliant journeys. And for me, it's just really exciting to be able to share that with people. And so that's the work that we've been doing since 2020. We started at the beginning of 2020, but that's been it. And we've done other events in between, and helping to just promote the work of other organizations. We really want to be a hub that connects different organizations and individuals, and we hope in time we can continue to grow the initiative. But to be honest, both Nata and I are now in our final years of our PhD, so we've been kind of been pumping the brakes just a little bit to prioritize, you know, the work that we have to do now. But this is something that for me is like I think it's like a lifelong passion project, to always continue to find ways to uplift the voices of people who often are not listened to. So that's kind of how it began, and it was amazing like how Nata just reached out to me, and we had very different skill sets. That was also the great thing. So she was very tech savvy, digital, you know, in designing websites and all those things. She was really able to come through there, whereas for me, I was like more like in content and the writing and reaching out and creating a network. So we merged really, really well, and it's been really like a beautiful experience to work with. And I've never met her in real life, which is the crazy part. Like, she's in Australia and I'm in Luxembourg.
We need to arrange a meeting. You must be like, we're both going to Botswana for a little bit.
Exactly.
Let's meet up.
We need to do like a little like Natasia's meet thing in Botswana to like cement the union. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, that's beautiful. Because I really, I came across your platform as well, and because obviously of the work that I do and how I'm constantly reaching out to different scientists, wanting to get to know their story and putting them, you know, allowing them the opportunity to speak and be loud. Because most of the time, scientists hide behind the pen. It's just easier, you know. So they know with the Instagram live, they kind of like force them to speak
come off
come out of that shell, you know. So I came across, you know, the initiative, and I was like, this is such an amazing initiative, because I always say that you can't really be who you can't see.
Yeah,
you know. And,
I agree.
Once you see somebody, they're like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, if they can do it, then yeah, exactly, absolutely.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. So what are some of the challenges that you've had to, overcome with running this platform?
Whew, a lot. I would say the biggest one is especially at the moment is time, because yeah, I mean, doing a PhD is it's a more than a full-time job. Like I work more than 40 hours a week most of the time. I'm in the lab on weekends sometimes, so it's sometimes difficult to find enough time to be able to do the things that we would really like to do. We want to do big projects and stuff, but we did come to the conclusion that at the end of the day, the PhD is a finite thing. It's going to end, and Visibility STEM Africa is a long-term investment. So it's okay that sometimes we have to pull back and prioritize, because at the end of the day, I want to finish my PhD and be like, I did a solid job. I feel proud of what I put in. And because I have to admit, and to people who want to do multiple things, you can do it, but you always have to keep in mind what's your priority when, because it's very easy to get distracted, especially when things are going well. Things were going really well for us with Visibility STEM, and it gets a lot, you start getting all these messages to do this, that, and the third, and you start to lose track of, your what's truly important in that moment. And that always changes, with time and as your life journey continues. So that's been definitely challenging. I think the other thing was because our team is spread out across multiple different countries, at some point we wanted to register, as a nonprofit, but we were so conflicted. Where do we register? I don't even know if I'll stay in Luxembourg long term, so then that also limited the opportunities, in terms of getting funding. For example, we had a lot of people who had interest even in donating, but we had to be you know what, it's not the right time yet. We have to hold off on certain things. So it's been a bit frustrating not to be able to, do some bigger projects, because we just didn't have the legal structure for it. But then again, it's a marathon, not a sprint. That's why I'm kind of okay with waiting on things, because I think there's always going to be room, and there's always going to be a need for what we're doing. We have not even begin to to tap the surface in terms of empowering Africans, because we also want to go beyond just the elevating the voices. That's definitely important and will continue to be our core thing, but also creating projects that directly can help the youth, educational programs there, and working with schools, things like that, to expose especially young people to a wider breadth of what STEM means and what it can be for them, and helping just get resources to people who don't often have access to them. So that's the long-term goal. But yeah, I would say time and just not having that structure that we would have liked to have has been the biggest challenge. But I think, considering we had basically only us as resources in our computers, I think we've done a lot of things. And of course, our amazing team, shout out to Prudence and Adama and Elaine and Anne, they also made everything much easier as well, just having people who are committed to contributing in the project, and everyone also, people have been so supportive from the very beginning, just people even saying yes to being interviewed and taking the time to type out to answer all these questions, and people attending conferences, and people reaching out and connecting us with people. It was amazing. Just the response for us, it was just so motivating. And we hope that especially when things pick up again, I'm actually not sure when that will be, because again, as I said, I just started my final year, so I'm a bit yeah, it's gonna be a hectic year, but we're still continuing to do things just on a much more low-key level. But in terms of continuing to promote people, continuing to profile people, that's something we're always going to do. And our website will continue to be a resource for people as well. There we have the profiles, but we also have an opportunities page that we're going to update fairly soon, where people can find things about scholarships, about fellowships, but ones that are specifically relevant for Africans, because usually on sites it's very mixed, and it can be hard to find things that actually apply for us, because it's, when you're an African, there's just way more barriers. It's just the reality. It's just
unfortunately
harder. It's
gonna take a while for us to
it'll take a while.
Yeah.
It's an unfortunate thing, and these are also things I like to bring to the surface. A lot of people, even in having been in Europe for 10 years now, yikes, 10 years now,
that's a while.
I realize how little they realize how hard it is for us to be able to have even a fraction of the opportunities they do. And A lot of people also are interested in helping out in whatever ways they can. So I also like to highlight just the realities of the inequality, because I've been very fortunate, but I also had to work my ass off, pardon my French, to like get to these opportunities, right? Like it's just, it's not easy. So I think that inequality is also something I'm really passionate about, finding ways to start addressing it, because it's hard being an African. I'm not gonna lie. It's tough.
Definitely. And I mean, I know that you guys obviously are saying you're taking it a bit slow right now, but once you get back on the horse and everything, Circular Digital would be happy, to collaborate with you guys on any project that you decide to do. I think it'd be really great, because I feel like all of us we have like the same mandate and the same vision of like, this is what we want to see. We want to elevate science and science in Africa. We want them to be up there. We want people to see we're capable and we can, and
we do with much less resources, with much less, like, our parents sometimes don't even understand what we're doing, but we still do it. Like, we just keep it pushing. So yeah, it's important to share those stories, and I 100% would be super keen to find ways to collaborate. Like, we're all about like collaborating and bringing our efforts together. We don't see the point in everyone doing things in a fragmented way. It's so much more powerful to come together and like work together in building something stronger for our communities. I think, especially when we have similar goals and visions, absolutely love to work together in the future.
I mean, together we can do more, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
We can do more. And I think the togetherness speaks a lot to how we've been able to survive and be where we are as people, because we've always tried to help the other person and be together and not to be in competition with one another. Although sadly, in some stages we do kind of compete, which is so unnecessary.
Absolutely. Yeah,
there's more than just room at the table.
I think people think that there's enough pie for everyone. It's a really big pie. Like, you don't need to toggle the pie. Enough pie. We can all have a nice serving of pie and still leave some for the next person. Yeah.
Definitely. I know that we're running out of time, because wow, this conversation. But I have just two more questions, and I know I can see them for you as well. So with your SciComm activities, when did you decide, I'm not just going to be a scientist, but I'm also going to be a science communicator?
That's a great question. You know what, to be honest, I feel like I've always just been someone who couldn't just do one thing. This has just been, it's like a personality trait. My parents always used to complain about this, like when I was in primary school, because I was that kid who was staying after school every day for one thing or another, and they're like, we just can't keep up with your schedule, your life is very chaotic. So I think I've always like had like a core thing, but always just needed other things to keep my brain busy, so to speak. But I think it was really rooted more in passion. Like, it wasn't like the whole V-STEM thing. It came out because of my my personal journey and feeling like there's this lack of representation, and I was like, well, I can do something about it. For me, it was just that, like, I've always also been quite ambitious, so I'm like, hey, I can just try this thing and see where it goes, and if people receive it, they receive it. If not, I tried. That's also this kind of the approach I had. But it was just driven by like my personal experiences, and then once there was like a vision and I saw it, and I found a partner who was also matching that vision, it was kind of just like a no-brainer. And to be honest, I didn't even see myself as a SciComm, even though I guess technically I am, because I was like just creating a platform to share other people's stories. But I realized in doing that, you are a science communicator. But it wasn't like a conscious thing, it wasn't like I want to do this thing. It was like just driven by the experiences I was having, and like, okay, I think that this is important and I want to do this because I didn't have this, and I want people, like, I know so many young Zimbabwean girls who are brilliant. I have cousins who are smart, like brilliant, ambitious, but they just don't have access to resources, they just don't. And so if I could help people like them, people I know, have access to some resources, like, I feel like I would have done something good for my community, and that just feels good for me as well, to be give back to the community that raised me. So for me, that was kind of the driving factor that got me really into it, really.
Ah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Let's go into the questions before we speak for an hour. Okay, let me just tap on the question. Can you see it?
A recent low that I've experienced. Well, a really big one. It was actually very, very significant for me and really not messed up, but it made my 2021 was a bit challenging. My mom got extremely sick. Like my mom almost passed away type of sick. She was in the ICU, had a near-death experience, and I was here in Luxembourg. And so that was really difficult. And also during COVID times, and there was like, can I go home? I couldn't go home. And, for there are people who I'm sure are aware that Zimbabwe is quite a challenging country economically. So, and the healthcare system is a bit, not the best. So that deeply affected me. I'm very close with my mom. So that was like a very challenging experience. And trying to balance that while doing the PhD was hard. It was tough. But what I can say is I really had a supportive environment, very supportive friends, a really, really supportive partner, and my work environment, like my boss really understood and gave me the grace to be like, I understand you're having a hard time. Take the time you need. And I think that's why it is important, if you can, to work in